Now, we've spoken... now, I've touched on multiple issues all throughout this this process on what a lot of the issues are. What we're going to do now is narrow the focus and talk about the major issues that are either consistent or predominant throughout all of the markets in Asia Pacific, or the most prevalent issues of concern when it comes to safety and security for tourists and travellers in Asia Pacific. So, silos. Silos is of significant concern. The reason being is that there is a significant lack of integration or sharing or collaboration between disciplines. So the aviation sector does not share well with the hotel sector. The travel booking sector doesn't share well with the safety and security sector. And tourism itself finds it's segmented away from business travel, for example. So everybody has their own agenda, their own view, and their own conferences and their own collaboration. From personal experience, having been to and presented and spoken at a lot of conferences all around the world, is that you find one lot of demographic, whereas there are several role plays or several stakeholders that have exposure or consideration or influence when it comes to the safety and security of travel, but they don't all collaborate and they don't all get together. So you can have a tourism industry body talking ad nauseum about this, and this, and you'll find completely absent travel managers, travel providers, travel safety personnel. Likewise, you can have an international security conference and so many people talking about travel safety or security and this and that, or local nuances in their own, and completely devoid of a single tourist provider, travel agency, travel management company, or travel manager within a large organisation, completely separate. So there's still significant silos, and the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing, and therefore information doesn't get to the right people, or it's not acted upon appropriately. Marketing is a dominating factor. Who has the biggest spend and the biggest budget? Whose message gets seen as a result, whether it's in search engines, whether it's on brochures, whether it's on the plane, whether it's in the airport, who's spending the most to get noticed. So often facts and figures and selective information is only seen or consumed by people at certain times because someone had a better marketing approach, someone had a bigger marketing budget, or they lucked upon something that went viral because it was good, bad, or otherwise. So the marketing efforts of everything from airlines to hotels to tourism, and even I'll factor in marketing and under that is news, what is consumed by the individual is significantly tainted or influenced based on how much money is spent or how targeted they've been. Communications. From a consumer's perspective, everybody now, the vast majority, everybody when they travel wants to be able to share pictures and chat with friends or FaceTime with their children while they're away and remain in that communications bubble that they're so comfortable with, so familiar with, so dependent upon in many aspects, is that's now determining people's travel ability. And that is airports are now being admonished as to whether there's free Wi-Fi available. Airlines, whether they've got Wi-Fi on board, are now being a consideration. So this now extrapolates across the entire ecosystem when it comes to tourism. So if you've had Wi-Fi connectivity at the airport, you've now had it on the plane you arrived, to then arrive at your hotel and find that they don't have it, and many parts of Asia Pacific don't, or it's still a cable, or you've got to spend an extra $20 or $30, starts to enrage, upset, frustrate or dismay a lot of travellers as well. Not to mention that when they then start to go away from public areas or hotels and so on, do they go to cafes to connect and reacquire information? And many travellers are still doing a little bit of work on the side. They've still got their smartphone and they're still checking emails or getting messages from work, and so therefore it can also be an integral part of their consumption, or they just simply wanted to be in touch with family and friends because it's new and exciting. So communications infrastructure is also a valuable metric or consideration or deficiency when it comes to some of the destinations across Asia Pacific. Emergencies. Bad things happen to good people all the time. It can be something as simple as falling off a steep set of stairs. Many stairs in Asia have short step lengths for people's foot width, and they increase at a significant incline that you simply wouldn't find in many other parts of the world. Falling on stairs, being hit by a motorcycle, riding on a footpath, which is not uncommon, motor vehicle accidents, dehydration, diarrhea, poisoning, running out of medication, children have anaphylactic shock, all of these things that happen all the time, every time, all around the world, and in your own place of residence, in your own hometown or city, is that emergencies occur. Now, the access to emergency services, the standard of emergency services, the quality and survivability associated with those emergency services, as well as the affordability, is a significant factor across Asia Pacific. So much so that there are many destinations and travellers who are simply travelling to locations that the first time they find out that the emergency standards are not that great is when they themselves are a victim and they simply pass away. A lot of people die unnecessarily whilst travelling or have significant complications because they didn't understand it in advance. They didn't appreciate it. But most concerningly of all of this is that they didn't take out travel insurance. Travel insurance can still be seen as an imbugnance. Less than 30 or 40% are still taking out travel insurance. Less than 6 or 7%, based on one of the statistics I saw recently, of business travellers have a business-dedicated travel insurance. They're appalling numbers. Nobody should be allowed to leave or enter another country without travel insurance. Now, I'm not advocating a particular product or a particular service. You should have it, but it should be horses for courses. It should be appropriate for the duration, your coverage, your pre-existing conditions, and a whole bunch of other things, but do not leave home without it, because you don't get to select accidents and emergencies. They simply occur to anybody, anytime, under any circumstances, and they're just not forecastable. But the mechanism and response and the standard for emergencies across Asia Pacific, your choices and preparations in advance will determine both your short-term and long-term repercussions, as well as your ultimate survivability. Now, I spoke about this with the media, with the marketing earlier. News and mass media, if it bleeds, it leads. There's so many sensationalised stories and negative aspects coming out of destinations. I highlighted Thailand's Bangkok issues and the coup and what an over-sensationalised statement that forced that so many people then chose to travel to Cambodia and Laos and associated far greater hazards, far greater risk. And as a result, there were some people, I was speaking to the medical director at one of the hospitals in Bangkok, and he was appalled and amazed that so many people that had cancelled travel to Thailand because of some news articles to travel to these lesser Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos and so on, to only then experience illnesses, motor vehicle accidents, heart attacks and a whole bunch of other things, to then be relocated back to Thailand where they could actually be treated into Bangkok, where it was apparently too dangerous to travel in the first place. It defies logic. However, common sense is not that common, and the news and the mass media has significant influence on people's decision and choices to travel. This is also part and parcel for the tourism industry and the providers of tourist-based services, transport, airlines and so on, so incapable of communicating a message. Time and time again we see it. That is, that the media or the news service will report a certain issue. The airlines don't then come out and say, well, actually, we've made an assessment and this can still be done. The hotels don't then come out. Tourism don't come out. There's not a collective body or a unified voice that then comes out and says, well, look, you know what? We don't care about what the journalist has said or that particular news agent has reported. These are the facts. This is what we know, and this is what you should know. And unfortunately, too much decision is then based upon that when it comes to consumers and travellers, because they don't have access to it, or they don't understand the situation, or the governments are shoving down their throats, terrorism, there's a terrorism problem, don't go there. And as a result, tourism is negatively affected when, as I said before, the chances of being exposed to or a victim of terrorism are very, very remote. Dr. Google, as it was once said to me, don't confuse my medical degree with your Google search, as a doctor once said. Medical professionals around the world are under siege from people trying to self-diagnose or Googling symptoms, or thinking they simply know more than their medical professionals. And the same thing applies when it comes to tourism. Just because it was the top 2 or 3 results for your very limited Google search, don't confuse that with my professional expertise, experience and advice. And that is what's happening with a lot of tourists, is news and marketing is dominating those results, paid results or otherwise, and people are acting upon that because it came through TripAdvisor, Expedia or Google search or some other social network. It doesn't mean it's qualified, it doesn't mean it's professional, it doesn't even mean it's accurate or correct. I'm not admonishing the process that is the internet. However, the consumption of random information and advice, as much as school teachers try and tell students, the same thing applies. It's a major issue across Asia Pacific. It's a major issue because the other factor that most people don't consider as well is if you're doing a Google search in English for a country such as India or China, well, you're only going to get the top English results, which is typically marketing and news outlets. It's not the local information, it's not local content because it's not in English locally. So again, this is a serious concern of people making decisions based on Google searches. Terms of reference. So this comes to your point of origin, to reference to your final destination. So if you're from an evolved economy and infrastructure and developed rule of law, if you're coming from Europe, the US, Asia, Australia or so on, it depends on what your appetite or benchmark for risk and hazard is. So you might not think twice about arriving at an airport in a vehicle that has no seatbelts because that's what you've got at home. However, when you compare it to your own point of origin and people wear helmets and seatbelts and there are police regulating speed and reckless behaviour, vastly different. Too many people either abandon their terms of reference or simply assume it's part of the travel adventure and experience. And travel should not be measured by stamps in your passport for entry and exit to a destination, along with horrible stories of adventure of, oh, you remember the time this happened, and Billy lost an eye, and Debbie lost a hand. That's not travel. That's not bragging rights. That's stupidity. And unfortunately, too many travellers and organisations are talking about these extreme adventures and so many things that were once in a lifetime, but a lot of them were so preventable because people simply didn't pause, understand, appreciate or digest information that was vital to their life safety and security. And risk. The comprehension of risk, the identification of hazards, determination of countermeasures, the choices associated with risk, it's a professional and formulaic approach, and it's not something within the capacity of the general tourist. So therefore, it falls upon the governing bodies, the service providers, the professionals and so on to provide or supplant that information. People are not stupid. Provide them information so they can make an informed decision. However, their ability to formulate risk, unless they're trained and professional and consistent, simply doesn't apply. So it shouldn't be made on the assumption that, oh, well, I'll tell you this piece of information. It's up to you then to determine whether it's... That's not risk management. And that's why government travel advisories do not work, because they're so generic that cater for everybody and nobody that an individual can't make an informed or a qualified decision based on the information that's provided. So risk is universally misunderstood and poorly applied across Asia Pacific because they're not understanding or applying or informed enough to make a risk-based decision unless they've been unfortunate enough to be in a circumstance previously that they shouldn't have to then say, well, this is what happened before and I made this choice and it worked out okay. Again, that's not necessarily risk management either. This plays into the risk management, their appetite or their self-valuation. So how much do they emphasise their own safety? How capable is an individual when it comes to varying risk appetite? Some people think nothing more of jumping, bungee jumping, or jumping out of planes, or abseiling, or whitewater rafting, and to others it scares them to death. Some people don't even want to get on a plane. It scares them that much. Some people are scared of spiders. Everybody's different. So people's ability there needs to be consideration for the individual variances when it comes to risk appetite and tolerance, because everybody's not the same. All of those examples that I spoke about before with various countries, there's a misnomer and a problem and a dangerous practice that's been accepted to say, well, we've put a risk rating on that country to say it's low, medium or high. What absolute rubbish. Look at all of these people, and they all have varying factors. They may speak the local language fluently, they may have been there 10 times, they may have even been an expat that was raised in that location, compared to someone who's never left their home. They've only had a passport for a week, they don't know anything about the world, and they're now travelling halfway around the world, and they're looking at something on a plate going, well, do I eat it or do I not? So it needs to be, and as much as travel is becoming a personalised experience and a customisation for an individual, so too must the travel process improve and evolve so individuals can self-determine or be influenced or catered to say, well, because you've got a fear of spiders, or because you've been here X amount of times, or because of this, this and this, you're at a higher risk, you're at a lower risk, and these are the resources and apportioning of support given to you. Particularly when it comes to service providers. If you're a travel management company, a travel service provider, you should be looking at this going, well, I've got 3 people here that I really need to manage. I've got 4 people over here that, you know what, they'll be fine because they're as capable as I am. And somewhere in the middle is everybody else. That's how it should be looked at, as opposed to, I've got X number of travellers, I'm going to treat them all the same. That's wrong, it's dangerous, and it also presents preventable and avoidable risk to both providers and travellers themselves. The other thing too, aside from Google searches or search engine results, is living memory or recall. How much are people able to recall that happened? So a lot of these events that I'm talking about, whether it be airport closures, earthquakes, kidnappings, terrorism and a whole bunch of other things increased, how much of this is remembered by one individual? How much of it's remembered by the community or even service providers? Most people's memory is limited to a major event that they remember that was reported around the world, or where were they at the time, 9/11, the moon landing, major events that the whole world shared and could reference, or what happened in the last couple of weeks. Beyond that, a person or an individual's ability to remember or recall things, particularly as it pertains to a destination of their own safety and security, is appalling across the board. It's not right, it doesn't work, and it should not be relied upon, but it's a significant point of concern. Stop making the assumption and start helping and supporting people remember the things that are most pertinent or the things that are most relevant. Aviation security, what a bugbear, what an inconsistency. What better demonstration of security theatre, and that is sort of pantomime, is there available to the entire world? No more so than Asia Pacific. You can go to one airport, to one set of aviation security measures, and it's not the same. You can wear a belt or a pair of shoes through 3 separate airports and then arrive at one destination. All of a sudden, you're a terrorist because you didn't take your shoes off and your belt's got some metal in it. Again, this is a point of concern, it's an issue, it's an annoyance, it's an unnecessary frustration for everybody to arrive at one airport and be physically violated at every inch and scrutinised and hands run through your hair and people grabbing at your nether regions, as opposed to, yeah, sure, no, wander over there, sure get on a plane and sure you get metal forks and knives. It's totally random, totally inconsistent. It's not the same. So as a result, you get varying degrees of preparation. What may have been acceptable cabin baggage at one airport, all of a sudden you're being slugged for hundreds of dollars of excess baggage, and you're being treated like a pariah because you've done this, this and this, or you've now got to strip off clothes that were acceptable previously, and children aren't allowed to advance to the passport control with their parents because only one of... It's vastly, vastly inconsistent. And Also, the service mentality of the government agencies. Some of them can be brutal. Some of them, forcing. There's nothing more concerning seeing a group of Muslim travellers being subjected to dogs running all over their bags without explanation, forced to remove face veils, and a whole bunch of other things that it's not a protection or a priority for one religion over another. Simple explanations and simple courtesies of every kind. The reverse applies. You can arrive in a country and see that the airport control, the person checking your passport, has got guns. Well, you're checking my passport. Well, why have you got guns? And everything is like a major military operation from the time you collect your bag, and you feel like a criminal and you're treated like a criminal at every juncture. And aviation security is here to stay. It will always be here, and it's only going to evolve. But the inconsistency across Asia Pacific in terms of what you do and don't have in your bags and liquids and all those sorts of things is a major pain for everybody. Up to and including the payment of visa on arrival and how long it takes to get. You can stand in line for an hour in some locations because there's 2 immigration officers, as opposed to some countries and airports where you arrive and there's a dozen or more and you're processed in 15 minutes. The inequality and inconsistency, as you can probably tell, is an annoyance to me as a frequent traveller, but it is a real pain to tourists and travellers alike. The other thing is proof. We often say is if you can't prove it, it's not safe. You need to have something that says what your evaluation is. Here at Intelligent Travel, you can see an example there of how we conduct personal individual safety and risk assessments for individual travellers based on all of those factors that I said before, with a growing number of safety metrics. But what did you make that decision upon? These low, medium and high rubbish that you see for these country risk reports or ratings are absolutely garbage, and that's not proof. What decision making did you as a service provider, did you as a traveller, or did you as somebody who's responsible for that individual make to determine that that individual was acceptable or should do certain things under certain circumstances? And without that proof, you open yourself up to a whole lot of liability. Just ask the travel insurance provider. If you don't have proof of loss, if you don't have proof of an instance and so on, then you simply don't get an insurance claim. So increasingly, not only can that proof then be used as evidence of prosecution against you to say, well, they've got proof and you honoured the claim, you're at fault. Increasingly, what proof or evidence did you have when you made a decision, good faith or otherwise, demonstrable to say that you actually mitigated your own risk or others' risk, particularly as a service provider? And if you don't have it, then good luck. Hopefully you've got good legal counsel and deep pockets.